Welcome to MiningsTalkTalk.com. I am your host, Tekoa Da Silva. With me on today's program is Jim Rogers.
Jim, how would you describe the current state of economies in the world right now?
Well, they're being force-fed. There's gigantic amounts of money being pumped into the world economy by governments and central banks, and the people receiving that money are better off. The people who don't receive that money are not better off, and the people ultimately who have to provide that money are certainly not better off. So we have a temporary respite where things look better and, in fact, are much better for some people, but overall it's making the situation worse, not better over the longer term.
Jim, what do you see coming down the road for common people, especially of the West?
Well, what's going to happen in the West is you're going to have more currency turmoil, you're going to have more debt turmoil, you're going to have higher interest rates, you're going to have higher inflation. Most people in the West are going to have a reduced standard of living over the next decade or two, and it's not going to be great.
Jim, how can the average American prepare for what's coming?
Well, the average American should figure out what he or she knows best and then try to use that as a way to protect herself. I mean, if you know a lot about agriculture, maybe you should focus on agriculture with your money and your investments and your time. If you know a great deal about cars, same thing. Focus there with your career, your time, your investment, your everything, because the only way you're going to survive all this is to focus on what you know best, what you love the most, and that is where you should be focusing your efforts in trying to get out of this. You might also start learning about foreign countries, foreign currencies, and maybe real assets. One way historically to protect yourself has been to own real assets in times of serious turmoil. In my view, it will be again.
One of your suggestions in the past, especially to Americans, has been to learn another language, specifically Chinese. Outside of that, Jim, would you recommend Americans of moderate means to consider leaving the U.S.?
Well, moving, whether you move from, Kentucky to Ohio or moving from Kentucky to Australia, entails a gigantic amount of emotional and intellectual courage and thought. You have to really think this through. Some people will be better off moving. I moved to Asia primarily because I want my children to grow up speaking Mandarin, Chinese, because I think that will be extremely important for them in the future. But I cannot advise anybody to move because that's something that only a person can make for him or herself. It's a big decision and a big move.
Jim, at the tail end of '08, as we went into that crash, you indicated that forced liquidations were the main culprit behind collapsing commodity prices. Do we still have a ways to go in any forced liquidation? Are we fully through that?
Well, we're certainly through the first phase. Commodities have rallied a great deal. Metals have gone through the roof in the past 15 months or so. Oil, most things. We did have forced liquidation. As you know, AIG and Lehman were both big players in commodities. They went bankrupt. They had to liquidate. The artificial forced liquidation, but that caused others to have to liquidate. We're certainly finished with that phase. But look, there could be other forced liquidation. If the UK or somebody suddenly goes bankrupt, we're going to have a lot more forced liquidation in the world. And as I said earlier, there's going to be more currency turmoil and debt turmoil in the world. The next time things start slowing down will be worse than the last time because many governments have now increased their debt by staggering amounts. And it's going to be worse. So there will probably be some forced liquidation. But in such a circumstances, I'd rather have real assets rather than paper assets because, well, first of all, shortages are developing in real assets. Oil reserves are declining, etc. And secondly, governments will print even more money. And whenever governments have printed a lot of money, you're better off owning real assets than paper assets.
Jim, do you expect the mining industry to be a strong place to be?
I'd rather be in real assets than in other assets. We are in a period now where there's a shift from the financial centers to the producers of real goods. You know, throughout history, we've had long periods when financial centers have been in charge, and then followed by long periods when producers of real goods, miners, farmers, etc., have been in charge. That shift is taking place again. I mean, the City of London is essentially bankrupt. Wall Street has serious problems. And you're going to find that over the next 30 years, financial centers, you see what's going on in Washington, they're doing their best, and it's going to get worse, to stomp on Wall Street. London's already done a lot of it. No, much better off being in other fields than in finance in the next 2, 3, 4 decades. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, Wall Street and the City of London were backwaters. Nobody with any brains went to Wall Street or the city because it was just a hopeless backwater. Well, that changed. Had a big bull market, and everybody got an MBA. Well, they all made mistakes. They should have gone and gotten A&M degrees, but that'll change.
Jim, what do you think needs to happen for our leaders to begin taking this thing seriously, the supply-demand shortfalls in just about all commodities?
Well, what will happen, what has always